You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning.
Hey, Justin. How was your week?
You know, it's for a long time, my weeks have been kind of the same, and I've just kind of been like, it's another rough week, another week of feeling burned out and all of that. And this week, while it wasn't not that, I got some good news. I've been waiting about 3 weeks to find out if insurance was going to approve me for a round of TMS treatment for my anxiety and depression.
Oh, okay.
So that's transcranial magnetic stimulation. So for 8 weeks, I'll go in for 36 rounds of treatment, and for about 30 to 45 minutes, sit there and have a magnetic pulse hammer my brain in hopes of seeing some real improvement. The results, I think 60 to 70% of people see results from it. And so it's exciting that there is something that could be a potential benefit for me that could help. It's hard to balance the wanting to be super hopeful with the part that's like, in the past, we've gotten our hopes up for a variety of things and things haven't panned out. And so kind of like finding that balance. So yeah, it's been a lot of emotions around that. And, you know, as I start that next week, curious to see kind of what it feels like, what the process kind of is, and how it can help. But I'm sure it's something we'll be able to talk about in the future as I kind of, get into it.
Yeah, we have a special guest here today, so we can't get into it, but I have so many questions that I want to ask. And especially just even thinking about when you said in the past, you've gotten your hopes up about things, and that's always been related to Sarah. But now if for once it's related to you. So I'll save all those questions for another day, but I'm really excited for you to have good news, because last time I think I said that for a number of episodes now at the beginning, you've said I'm struggling, I'm burnt out, I'm this. And so for you to have good news and to have some hope on the horizon, that's huge. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
What about you? How are things going over there?
Going okay-ish. I think last time I told you that Sean had a whole bunch more biopsies. 6 new biopsies of his skin. 3 came back cancer, 2 came back pre-cancer, and 1 came back nothing. So that means 3 more Mohs procedures, 2 excisions, which are kind of like Mohs, but they, takes a little less time. And then 1 nothing. So we're waiting to schedule that. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
We had an almost hopeful moment where we got this email in our MyChart that said that he was going to qualify for Evusheld. I think I'm saying that right, which is this super COVID booster that people can have. And I didn't think it was time for him to qualify. So I was so excited.
Yeah.
And then the next day we got another MyChart message that said, just kidding. We sent that email to the wrong people.
Oh.
And I was like, what? So it was almost like it wasn't on my horizon. I didn't think he was ready. I thought it was only really recent transplant people that could get it. But then thinking about it, my brain had already gone there of and this, he'll be super boosted and all of that. And then to get the other email was really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
So, highs and lows, but I want to not use any more time before we introduce. We have a guest today. We've only ever had one other guest, but really excited to introduce a friend of mine today. We, because you and I are both spousal caregivers, that's typically what we talk about.
Yeah.
And there are so many types of caregiving. And so you and I had decided, let's talk to a caregiver who cares for somebody other than their spouse. And so my good friend Liz Naylor is here. She and I have known each other for a long, long time. Our daughters went to elementary school together.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until kind of later in life, as we got to know each other better, and Sean's needs increased and your kids' needs increased, Liz, that the kind of that caregiver layer got added to our friendship as well. But our girls have stayed friends even though they haven't gone to school together since elementary school, they have stayed friends. And I love that. And then you and I have become friends as well. So Liz, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to talk about it and to be invited into your space as well to share. So I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. It makes me think because, Maya has spent a lot of time at your house. You guys used to have Taco Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, Maya went over because your family used to live super close to ours. And when I was thinking about this, I thought how cool that both of our kids have these other households that they can go into that are full of medical equipment. And that's just the norm and I just love that they have those friendships for so many reasons, but that they, most of Maya's friends come over and see IV poles and whatever and are like, whoa, but your kids wouldn't bat an eye because your house is also full of medical equipment. And so, yeah. Will you tell us a little bit about your 4 kids and what's their diagnosis and just a little bit about them?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, well, how much time do you want me to have?
Right, exactly.
So I have 4 kids. They all have myotonic muscular dystrophy, which is a rare disease that most people have never heard of. And so even most medical providers are very unaware of it, maybe heard like a snippet of it in med school or at some point somewhere. It's a genetic autosomal dominant trait. So that means that with each pregnancy, there's a 50-50 shot of getting it. However, was completely unaware of it until I was pregnant with the 4th one. And so in their situation, it's a neuromuscular disease, but it's strange because it basically affects all the organ systems in the body. There's very few parts of the body that are untouched. But unlike other muscular dystrophies, which a lot of people are familiar with, it's far more neurological than it is muscular. So it really, the easiest way that I describe their disease is that it's about traffic patterns, because it's about how the brain is communicating with all of the systems in the body, a lot of the muscular systems especially. And so it's like, on a good day, if you go outside and there's no traffic, you get from point A to point B without issue. So at some points in time, they will have no issues whatsoever. If there is a little bit of traffic or an accident might slow things down. And so sometimes their brain takes longer to communicate to their muscles. And so we have issues with either the myotonia piece is the muscles contract and can't relax. So one of the biggest things people see is like hand cramping and things like that. But that also relates to all of the smooth muscle with inside the body. So digestive system, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't affect the heart muscle, but it affects actually how the heart is, then the brain communicates with the heart. So it can cause issues with that. It also, with traffic, sometimes it can come to a dead stop. And so there can be points in time where the communication between the brain and other systems in the body completely shuts down as well. And so you just never kind of know what's going to happen. And it's not, just like traffic changes every day. With some level of predictability, that's kind of disease too, right? Like you think that and then you're wrong. You're like, oh, whoops. Like now there's like a turkey crossing the road and this is down for whatever reason that I didn't expect. So it does cause, like I said, there's lots of things within, the physiological nature of the body, but cognitively too, they have slow processing speed, kind of manifests itself a little bit like autism in some respects. They have issues with attention deficit, anxiety, because also if you think about traffic and you think about how people drive, right? And what's that like for some people? They have no problem. They're like, yep, here's the traffic. I flip on my music. I turn on my podcast, my book, whatever. It's totally fine. Other people, and even within my own kids, their levels of anxiety are different. Some people are driving. They're like, I need to get off the road. I need to find another path. They're like, I can't do this anymore. Some are like, I'm out. I'm going home and shut down, right? Some people get really angry. Some people will cry, like you just never know what's going to happen. And so definitely, my life is incredibly unexpected and you just kind of never know what's going to come next. Although, like I said, there is, some level of somewhat of a predictability, but the issue with their disease too is that it's so complex. It's actually considered to be the most complex medical disorder out there because it manifests so differently in everyone. And it causes so many strange symptoms, like that people often will attribute to other things, like it causes cataracts. So my kids are presently 11, 13, 15, and 17, and my 17-year-old developed cataracts last year, which you typically don't see.
Yeah. Has it showed up with your 4 kids? So it's kind of amazing. I had never heard that about. So 50% chance. And then for all 4, all 4 have it. And you said it shows up differently. How does it show up in each of them? Does it look the same? Does it look different?
Yeah. So my oldest one, Giacomo, who is 17, he was the one that first showed symptoms. So the disease itself has 3 levels of onset. It has congenital onset, so from birth or even pre-birth. And then there's the juvenile onset that the other 3 have. And then there's adult onset as well. And the prognosis is basically the same. It just is when the symptoms will show up. So for Giacomo, I noticed when he was very young that he, it was just like an odd collection of things. Like he was low tone, he drooled a lot, he had delayed communication skills and things like that. And that's why I spent about 4.5 years trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And lots of like I said, speech articulation issues, so many very like little tiny things about him. Then when he got tested positive for it, I had gone to a neurologist because basically I kind of like ran out of like people to go and test. It's like I saw dozens of doctors and speech and ENT, and everyone's like, either you're crazy, there's nothing wrong with him, he's a boy, he'll outgrow it, or this is what's wrong with him, and then they were wrong, or they're like, something's wrong and we have no idea. So finally found a person who knew, and then she, you know, at that moment when she recommended testing the other kids, I didn't think there was going to be anything wrong. And it wasn't until they were about 6 or 7, then I started noticing that maybe the processing speed, just you know, like a delay in kind of them understanding what was going on. School becoming a little more challenging. And then the hand cramping, so their muscles, you know, their hand cramp up, noticed that first. And so for the other two, noticed that when they were about 6 or 7. And then my youngest one, Isadora, noticed that that's her. She's 11 now and just starting to get some of that muscle cramping in the last year or so. They have 3 of the 4 of them have pretty significant respiratory issues. This is like a whole other episode to go into like what with my son. So we did have a pretty scary time with him after a surgery and complications with that. He has a G tube. This is my oldest one, and a trach, and is on a ventilator at night. He's vent dependent at night. So the other 2, the middle 2 one is on a ventilator and one is on BiPAP at night as well. And so that's kind of what, like, those are the biggest things we've seen. My oldest daughter, Gianna, the one who's good friends with Allison's daughter, definitely has a lot of cognitive impairment that's kind of showing up more and more. So it's interesting because in some ways I think she's more severely affected in that way than her brother is, who by definition is actually more severely affected. He's got, you know, the trach and the G tube. So it's just, again, it's like different parts of the body shutting down. Like Gianna had an MRI done a few years back and showed a lot of atrophy and lesions in her brain at age 13. That was really surprising. They said, like, it looks like she has a brain of a 70-year-old woman with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
But the other ones, you know, actually, and Giacomo had an MRI the day before that for a different thing, and his was perfect. So it's really strange like that, where you would think, oh, okay, well, he's getting worse, she's going to get worse, and it's not really like that. So,
wow.
So what is a typical day like for you as a mother, as someone who cares for, you know, your 4 children, and I don't know if you're working as well, but it's like that's a lot to be juggling.
Yeah. So a typical day, it kind of actually depends on the day and whether or not we have nursing care. So Giacomo requires 24-hour nursing care. Insurance covers 20 hours a day. So I have somebody here on a good day from 7 to 5, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. So if I don't have a nurse, then I have to get up and be the nurse and you know, relieve the nurse who's going home for the night. But yeah, so they all, the big 3, all with the respiratory issues, all have respiratory cares that need to be done. Breathing treatments, inhalers, nebulizers, all of that stuff. And then, you know, cleaning cares of my son, getting his feed going, things like that. And then just kind of getting them out the door. The nice thing is that they have been going to school as of late, which is fantastic. So, I mean, you asked me this question a year ago, I would have given you a different answer.
Right.
So that's good. They do get a lot of help at school. There's one-to-one support for Giacomo and for Gianna, the oldest 2. And then Luke, my 3rd, he's getting more and more specialized support. And then, you know, they come home and we kind of repeat all over again. So then there's the afternoon cares. They require a lot of sleep. So bedtime at our house is like 6:30 on school. Okay. So, which some people think, you know, when I look at this, it's like, well, there's a lot to do, but also then I get downtime, which is good because I'm also in full-time grad school getting a dual master's.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
And you're trying, are you still working? Are you still trying to work or at this moment?
I am working. I did work full-time before. I work as a 0.5 at Regents Hospital as a lactation consultant, and then have my own business. But then just to make things more fun, end of May was diagnosed with skin cancer with a pretty severe basal cell carcinoma that took away about 1/3 of my nose and required major facial reconstruction.
Wow.
So because of that fact, I actually haven't been able to go back to work since June because I can't wear a surgical mask on it because the skin graft is a little too precarious for that. And so, so just to make things more fun.
Right.
But, you know, the irony being, you know, when I went through that whole process, they're like, you have such a good attitude. And I was like, y'all don't know what my life is. Like
right.
this is like nothing. You know, I was like, this isn't going to kill me.
Right.
I have 4 kids with myotonic dystrophy, and this is like uncomfortable and kind of annoying, but
Right.
it's not what they have. So
right.
I guess, you know, I mean, it was, well, Allison, you saw my face.
Yeah.
It was quite a
was
special
intense.
process.
It was. Yes. Yeah.
So, and actually I have surgery coming up here again in like a week and a half. So, you know, but I've been trying to work back into doing some private clients and stuff like that as I've been able to. And the beauty of, well, present moment, this is why the pandemic has been good, I guess, is that I've been able to get paid as a PCA for my kids.
Oh, nice.
They changed the laws sort of temporarily to allow parents of minors to be a PCA, which is good because I couldn't find any more help.
Right.
So, you know, the shortage of people available who are willing to work is everywhere. And so I tried so hard thinking I was actually planning to go back to work in the fall, and then I was not able to because I couldn't find a mask that I could wear. And so, which was good because then I also couldn't find any help for my kid. So it's been a strange blessing for me. Thank God for the pandemic. Because it's allowed me to stay at home with my kids.
Yeah.
Because certainly if I could wear a mask, I would be back at work for sure.
Right.
And you know, and so it's nice to be able to focus on them a little bit more.
For sure.
And again, I also felt like it's not like I'm not doing anything.
Oh yeah. No. Right. Nope. No. You know, one of the things that I always find when people are like, what's the hardest part about caregiving? One of the things that I find so challenging is being pulled between, you know, and I just have I just have Sean and I have Maya, right? But being pulled between the two of them and their needs. It's easier now as Maya is older, but you know, especially when she was little and it's like she needs me and he needs me. And I just am always feeling like I need to be in both places and don't know who to go to, right? Yeah. And so how do you, especially with 4 kids and all of them needing you, you know, in really different ways, plus the pull your grad school and work and all of that stuff. How do you sort of go through your days being pulled in those directions and deciding like which of my kids needs me the most right now when really they all have really high needs?
Yeah, it was a little while back. I taught them about the word called triage.
Yes.
Because that really is what it is. And I mean, I think that this is one thing where I actually don't know what it's like to have a neurotypical kid who's unaffected by disease.
Right.
So kind of nice to have all 4 of them so they all kind of get it.
Yeah.
Which is not to say though that there haven't been moments where it's like, oh, well, you're doing this. Like, you know, one of my kids, she went into respiratory failure last fall, which was really scary, you know, and there's like, oh, well, you're going to stay in the hospital with Gianna. And I was like, yes, I am. And also when you had heart surgery, when you were a baby, I stayed in the hospital with you. And when you had this other surgery, I was in the hospital too. And so we have had to have some of those moments about that. You know, like this is the reality of their disease. I will help all of you whoever needs it the most in that moment. And as of late, I've actually been making them help me because it's been just, especially this semester, just the way that my classes line up is that they're like smack in the middle of when I'm trying to get them ready for bed. So I'm like teaching my 11 and 13-year-old how to do some of my son's medications.
Nice.
Yeah, which is like he kind of doesn't like that, but then I'll get that explaining that I'm like, hey, look, like I have things to do, like I can only do these certain things for you, and so if there are other things that other people can do, you have to allow that to happen, you know. Yeah. And so there are, I would say, like some teachable moments. Definitely, it is hard though, and like I'm really grateful that I have this team of people that they call themselves the grandmas. That when my son was in the hospital and things were falling apart around me, there were a bunch of doulas and midwives because I worked in the birth world and still technically do, that they just kind of came in and they helped fill in a little bit too. So some of those things, we had a schedule going for a long time when I was needing all that extra help, and they would just come in and do the things that like would be lovely for me to do, like have puppet shows with my art projects and stuff. And so they like everyone kind of loved it though. So I feel like that for me, because I'm such an independent / stubborn person, that sometimes it was really hard for me to ask for help. And those moments then, like I said, that was like 2.5 years ago when my son was in the hospital, there was no choice. I was like, there literally is only one of me. And I have to decide. And also like asking some people who would be willing to stay with my son at the hospital too. So I could kind of go back and forth, you know? But yeah, it's definitely hard, but I feel like they've always kind of been my little ducklings. And so, I, long before I knew of their disease, I remember talking with, it was like a mother of one of my clients as a birth doula. And she was having her second baby. And she said, the best thing that I ever did is I made them see that we were a team as, as a parent and children. And if one goes down, we all go down. And so I kind of had adopted that before.
Yeah.
Long before I knew of their disease, which was really helpful because it kind of just made them understand we all have to help each other if we're going to be able to make it through. Because it's even when I was married, it was like kind of doing this all myself thing.
Yeah. Saying that, it kind of reminds me of something I came across on your website where you talked about how there's a lot of organizations that help, whether it's the individual patient or there's less of organizations, but that help the individual caregiver, and kind of treating those as separate sort of entities, and how with what you're doing, trying to like treat it as the family as the unit, and kind of have a more holistic view on support. And so is that something, like, how did that come about? Or is that something you can talk a little bit more about?
Yeah. So I guess I should talk a little bit about, so My-Vida is the nonprofit organization that I started in. So my being the, partly from myotonic dystrophy, which is the kid's disease, and I as in like ownership over oneself, and Vida is life. And the organization is actually My-Vida on purpose, because, from when you're born to when you die, those two, those years are summed up by that little dash of punctuation that basically is like your entire life. And so helping people to really thrive in that little dash, which is thriving in your whole life. And so for me, it was just a lot of it too stemmed even from doing birth work as a birth doula, and seeing that like all of these parents are like, oh, we're in survival mode, and that was acceptable. Yet I work in infant feeding. And so we are like talking about babies and like things like failure to thrive, which is like a failure to thrive is like a kid isn't getting enough to eat, and the blame goes to the parent most often. Yeah. So I was like, why is it okay for parents to be surviving, but they're supposed to make their kids thrive? Like it was this like imbalance. It's like, it actually has to be everybody. Right. I could get into like, there's many elements, even of like physiology, like what it means to be a parent, and the fact that like your own body cares about you. It doesn't actually care about the other people around you. So you do have to be taking care of yourself in order to take care of others. But then also like just seeing how I joined these caregiver support groups, and I could see so many people who were really struggling with the like, why me? Why is this happening to me kind of thing? And that sort of disconnect from it. And for me, when I found out, like the first thing in my head, I was like, why me? Like, why was I chosen for this? And I felt like part of it was that I had that background in support, and seeing the importance of really like fostering that relationship between the whole entire family, between the parents, between the baby, like all of that. And so I was like, I have to kind of take all of these gifts and put it together in something that can really truly work, because for other organizations too that exist, like my kids have gotten Make-A-Wish. They go, like the Muscular Dystrophy Association does these events, and those are all like these very specific individual events that occur and then end. But like you all know, like it's every day, it's all the time, 24 hours. Like it doesn't, even when you think that you're having a break, or someone's like, oh, let me, it's like the same thing with like a baby. Let me come and hold the baby for you so you can take a shower. Like, no, like that. I need you to like fold my laundry so I can be, and like, like people kind of don't get that piece of it, and they think that they're being helpful. So I just wanted something where we were looking at the whole entire family unit as like making sure that not anybody is going down, not anybody feels like they're being overburdened. And I think that that's a thing that happens in just seeing like having little kids. It's a heck of a lot easier for me to tie your shoes than for me to sit here and wait for you to tie your shoes. Right. And so you do that, and that's completely not helpful. Right. Then like nobody learns how to tie their shoes. And so also wanted to make sure that my kids, because they are not going anywhere, the plan, unless they would decide at some point to like live in some group facility or someplace else, that they're going to be with me for their entire lives. And so I was like, I can't have you not being productive and feeling like you're doing something that's helpful and worthwhile. So that's even a lot of the stuff we do. Like, I mean, my kids have a lot of chores, a lot of tasks that they do. I got chickens on purpose to give them like more to do, actually. Because I feel like it's so important, because it's so easy for people, both the caregiver and the person with chronic illness, to just fall into that depression, and that stress of like, this is all that we do. And so finding ways to really bring that together in a way that makes sense, and also I have to like have a certain level of respect for their disease too, because it's not mine, and to allow them the space to talk about it, and it's hard because there's all these treatments, all these things to do. And sometimes they had this like, why are we doing all this? And I'm like, well, let me kind of explain to you like the importance of your respiratory function, like in a way that makes sense to you. But yeah, I felt like I needed something that existed so that people could feel that level of support that is so often forgotten. And that's the thing too, like working in birth, it's like, if you guys are familiar with like birth doulas, they do, it's like informational support, educational support, physical support. They're not doing anything clinical, and they're not your parents or your family or your sister, which is nice, because I'm sure that you guys have experienced like our closest family are sometimes very amazing and helpful, but also like don't get it. And also some like offering bits of advice that's like not actually helpful. But so with My-Vida, like we like establishing these Vida allies, that's what we're calling it. So like having people who are really like, they have your back there, but there's like kind of that cohesive team that isn't really emotionally invested in it in the way that your close friends and family would be, so that they can have that little bit of an outside perspective to see where, what kind of things are going well for your household, what things are not, where do you, where are you struggling, and where could you use a little bit of extra support? And that's part of actually, like I went to grad school in order to become a better leader for this organization. So I'm getting a master's in social work and a master of science in disaster resilience leadership.
Ooh, disaster resilience leadership.
I know and this whole thing's the craziest thing, because resilience is like one of the words in our, like fostering resilience as part of the mission of My-Vida. I really honestly didn't know what I was getting myself into. Because we're talking like big disasters, like hurricanes, floods,
right.
Like that. But learning all that with the social work piece about, people with chronic illness, like you're living with your own little disaster. Every single day. It's about, like I said, it's about triage. It's like, how do we put that out? How do we prevent it? Because we talk a lot about like prevention and in recovery mode from disaster. Like, how do you make this not be so terrible next time?
Right.
Because there will be a next time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think you probably all know, it's like waiting for that next shoe to drop, and like, how many more are you going to throw at me? Right. So yeah, it's been a really great experience for that. Just to kind of learn more about like on a big scale, but also small scale, because there's so many systems involved, and that's part of it. Like with My-Vida, helping people navigate those systems, as I'm sure just like even talking, about your week, about like insurance is like one of the systems.
I forgot I'd heard in the past, but I'd forgotten the thing about the dash. I love that what you said about the dash, that the dash between the My and the Vida is like, this is your life, right? This is like a representation of your life. And you also mentioned about the fact that like your kids aren't going anywhere, right? They live with you, and they're probably going to always live with you. And you and I have had frank conversations in the past about what it feels like knowing that we both have family members that we will likely outlive.
Yeah.
And so, which of course, like as a spouse, it's heartbreaking, but it's more common. But as a mother, I can't even imagine. Like, and so how does that knowledge sort of impact you as you go through your day? Like how do you live with that?
With that. Yeah. And I was like, okay, it's like, I'm not going to get emotional. I think like on the one hand, even getting their diagnosis before, early on when there was only Giacomo was affected and not in these like very serious ways that he is now, it changed my perspective as a parent. So, and Allison, me, so this is probably not surprising to you that I was and always have been a perfectionist, straight A student, like involved in everything, like do all the things, be in all the things, which I think is like my coping strategy.
Yep.
So it was really refreshing on the one hand to be like, I don't have that for my kids at all. Like, it was really great to be like, to learn very early on, which like, I think some parents take years, if ever, to understand that like their feelings about what their child should do are kind of irrelevant to what that child should actually do, right? So I learned that like, it doesn't matter what I want for you. You have to want what you want for yourself. Right. And so that was a big part of it, that like, I feel like having zero expectations for my kids is great, except for them to be like as healthy as they possibly can be and to be as happy as they possibly can be. So going into it, because like I said, they were very little. They were like, 0, 2, 4, and 6 when we found this out. And so that was really helpful, I think, just to set the stage for me. And then as I learned more about the disease and got connected with other people and learning actually about like the grieving process, that I think that people like talk about the stages of grief and how that works, and like understanding that like I actually get to grieve them every day.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you like go through those motions of like, okay, we're doing all these tasks, but also like can appreciate the things, which I think a lot of people don't get to live their lives in a way that sees the finite nature of it.
Yes.
Right. Like, I mean, like I said early on, like, okay, they're not going to get to see the world probably as adults. Like, I lived with, my parents and they were always like, oh, when we retire, blah, 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 we're going to do that. And I was like, screw it. We're doing it now. So like these kids have had way more stamps on their passports than most people have. I mean, we've been to China, we've been to Italy, we've been to New Zealand, a couple of them twice because my sister lives there. We've been to Costa Rica a bunch of times, like Guatemala, like we've been all over the place because I want them to experience their life, So then it's like every day I like knowing that I won't have them forever. It does actually grant me a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
A little bit more understanding, a little bit more like, okay, let's read that extra story, but also like within boundaries. Like I'm not going to read you 17 extra stories,
Yeah. Right.
So I think that there's that part of it that I'm just like trying to make the most of their lives and even establishing My-Vida and talking to them about doing it and like why we were doing it for them to get involved, for them to understand that, they do have ownership over their disease, it's definitely, of course it's hard and I know that it will be terrible, but I do think that that is a blessing to know that you don't have that person forever.
Right.
So I take no moment for granted, which I'm sure that like, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but like, I get really irritated when I see people like posting memes about kids and parenthood and, like complaining about them, just like perhaps you do, like people complaining about their spouses. I'm like, just like, and that's sort of like, that's your thing, but that's a negative way to live, but I just can't live that way because of the reality of it. So it's a beautiful and hard thing all the time.
Yeah.
And we have had, well, like I said, we almost lost my son in 2019 after, and I will not get into that, but it was quite the ordeal. And even after that, like he and I talked a lot about that because he became very aware of that he had almost died. And, like talking to them, I was like, this, about your disease, giving them information that is appropriate for their age and talking to them about like, this isn't my choice. And so sometimes with people with their disease, they will end up dying very suddenly. So then obviously it's not your choice, but like, I have to kind of respect that. And sometimes there's a point where they just stop fighting, where like the disease just takes it too much. And that's been a hard thing. So my daughter, Gianna, who you know very well, she was in the hospital twice last year, but was actually sick with pneumonia twice. We were able to do one of her recoveries at home and one where she went into respiratory failure. And, like I've seen those glimpses of like, she's about to give up here. And which is horrifying, but also it's like, again, this is not my body. I can only help provide the medical support that I'm able to listen to you. But yeah, and the older two, we have had those conversations about like when it gets to be too much, you can tell me. Like when you're doing all these things, like you can tell me.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's a horrible way to live, but if I don't talk to all my friends about this stuff.
Right. Well, we get it, unfortunately.
You get it, right?
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge, Liz, like, like you said, that most parents don't have to have that conversation with their kids. I mean, and maybe we all should.
Right.
But most parents don't have that. And so just to like, there's so many things that you and Justin and I do this all the time too. Just say really casually, like, oh, we almost lost him. Oh, she went into respiratory failure. Oh, they're on BiPAP and, all the things.
Right.
That most people are like, wait, what happened?
Right.
But that they're so just embedded into your life. So I just want to like hold space for that for a minute that's heavy, that there's heavy stuff, these conversations that you're having with your kids and these moments that you're having. And I hear you because I feel the same way with Sean about that. Like, I don't take moments for granted, like my phone is so full of pictures of like Sean and Maya together because I see a sweet moment between the two of them. And I'm like, I got to capture that moment. And so I think there is this beauty that we recognize because we can see the other side. And so, I mean, I'm grateful for that. I certainly wish that I didn't have it, but I'm also grateful for that piece as well.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that with the pictures because I do like hold it together most of the time, but then there'll be these moments where I just like totally lose it.
Yes,
right.
Of course.
And I had a situation a couple months ago where like I got a new phone and my old phone had like a way more storage on it. So there's a zillion pictures and videos and stuff. And they convinced me at T-Mobile to leave it there so that they could like upload it to the cloud. And ultimately the phone was stolen. So I lost presently somewhere in the cloud, I hope, are like 3 years worth of pictures. And I was like, I like totally was like, you have no idea what you have done to me. You know, like most people like wouldn't be that devastated.
Right.
I like got in my car and I just started bawling. I was like, this is like, you know, I was like, you guys have no idea what you did to me, because they don't, right? You're like, can't you just like take some more pictures of your kids?
Right.
Yeah. So, and it was just like a funny thing to be like, oh yeah. Yeah. Which is, why I have what some people would think way too many pictures and videos of my kids. So like, it's not even enough.
Yeah. No, it's not enough. Never going to be enough. Yeah.
One of the things that Allison and I have been talking about recently is how, with like this role of being a caregiver and all of the like ways that kind of can take over our lives, that it's so easy to like lose your sense of yourself as a person.
Yeah.
And to kind of lose touch with that, and that, you know, we kind of forget that we should be able to be whole and complete people as well, outside of just this role as a caregiver.
Yeah.
So how does that, like, how do you balance that? Or how have you, whether that's making space for yourself or not to quote unquote self-care as much as, you know, I think we all kind of hear that and roll our eyes a lot, but like we do need to kind of find a balance of where, you know, we make space for us as well.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about self-care, because that was the thing, right? That, you know, I used to preach to people like new parents. And then I really feel like I understood it more after I got divorced the second time and was like able to really be by myself and to understand what like work I had to do on myself, but also how to do that when it was just me, right? Like, and my kids live with me full time all the time. Like, you know, part of this morning why I had to bump it though was because I went to a yoga class that I haven't been going. I used to go every Saturday, and this was the second time I went back since the pandemic. I was like, I have to go back to this class.
Yes.
I have to do this for myself. And so I do think like self-care is a funny thing because we do need it, but people don't, like you said, really understand what that means. Like self-care is not getting a massage. Do you know how stressful it would be for me to go and get a massage? Right. Like, it just like doesn't really work. Like come to my house. But that's why, again, having this hot tub has been like my own thing. I have found for me, I do things for myself. Like I do practice yoga a lot and meditation, but little things that make my life better. So for me, like self-care actually is getting my coffee ready the night before so that I wake up and it's like there. It's like getting up and making my bed. And also making my children make their beds because I just like the way that it looks. You know, it's like little tiny things like that. And it's a little easier now that they're older because I can actually say like, you guys, I need to go and work out here for a minute in the other room. Stay over there, please. Because I do think it's important, but I feel like it is so critical to find those little things for yourself. Like, again, I'm like really into water. So I'm like, I have to like take a shower and sit in my hot tub basically every night to like clean my day off of me to go to sleep. Because also I know that if I take a shower at night, when I get up in the morning and I have to start like running all over the place, they're like, where would I have taken a shower when my children are all over? Just like, it just can't happen. Right. So, and every person is different, like what is important to them. It's very interesting in social work school, like at least the school I'm in, they really push the self-care on everybody. And so it's been an odd thing that I didn't expect out of there, but like really having friends that I feel like become my self-care too. Like the people that I can like touch and like send really goofy memes to, you know, like my like grad school bestie, like we both like to cook and we like send little mini videos of our, like whatever we're cooking.
I love it.
Which is like, it sounds really funny. And like, I don't know, like I remember the first time he sent me like a shot of him like making coffee and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing, you know, but it's like finding those little moments and he himself has been through a lot of stuff and lost a brother to suicide and struggled with addiction, like all of these things. And so we kind of look ourselves like the wounded healers. So we both like, been through a lot, but also like in a place because now he's like takes care of his nephew. And it was just like little tiny things like that. And I think that the human connection is so hard. You know, one of the things like when you're talking about like the way that we speak very casually to people about stuff. And actually this guy was an ICU nurse and a psych nurse. So I'm like, he's great. I can lay it all on him.
Yep.
You know, but like having those people that you can talk to about it and don't give you what I always call like the sideways head tilt of pity, you know, where you like say something and
puppy dog eyes.
Oh, and I'm like, no, like I just told you this. Like, I just need you to like listen to me.
Yeah.
I also don't need any sort of resolution or tips. I just listen, you know, like, so I think that my circle has gotten a lot smaller in that respect, in that like, I just kind of know who can I say these things to very frankly, and you're not going to like freak out. But I've also had to have some hard conversations. Like my family, I have 3 siblings and 2 of my brothers have never ever asked me one single question about the kid's disease or acknowledged it ever. My sister will talk about it, but like usually it's the pity or the like, you need to listen to this like self-care guru. I'm like, I'm good, you know? But my parents really have struggled because my mom like comes from a medical background and my dad just like doesn't like to share emotions. And so many years ago, she was like, it's just so hard for us to hear you talk about this. And I said, how the hell do you think it feels for me?
Right.
And I was like,
good for you. Did you say that actually?
I did.
Good.
I was like, yeah. And I was like, no more. I was like, I can't take any more of you not listening to me.
Yep.
Because like, I understand that this is hard that for you to lose your grandkids or like know that you are going to, but like, these are my kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Whatever it is for you, it's way worse for me.
Yeah.
And it's worse to be so alone. So I think that like, again, this is also what like, you know, leaving 2 crappy relationships will do for you. It's like, it gives you a little bit more of that like chutzpah to be like, nope, I'm not going to do that. And you can like really separate yourselves from people that get it and from people that don't, which I think you like, I don't know, again, I don't want to speak for you or assume that we're all in the same boat, but like with the pandemic, I think was actually helpful to see like the people that get it and the people that don't, like, if you're not going to be careful, we're not going to be hanging out.
Yes.
Right? And maybe not even after the pandemic, because you just like, showed me a side of you that I don't think is conducive for my life and what I have going on, you know, and that's okay. So I love that I have nurses here for my son. They've become like my best friends because we all get it, you know?
Yes. Totally.
So I think and I don't think that people think about like friendships and relationships as being a form of self-care, but I think that that's probably been one of the best forms that I have found.
Yeah.
Is those connections, which is also, you know, like part of the stuff with My-Vida is like, we want to help people to like find those little moments and those connections because it's so isolating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We always like to talk to supporters because there are people who are listening who might not be a caregiver, but know caregivers because we all do.
Yeah.
And so like, if you could say, because I know in the past, like you've said things like, well, I put out on this app a whole bunch of asks and people didn't show up. Right. So you've had people show up, you've had people not show up. Like when you think about supporters listening today, who have a caregiver in their life, are there things that what would you want to say to them about how to best support the caregivers that they know?
It's funny. I wish that my midwife, Rebecca, I wish she were here on this conversation. She caught 2 of my babies and then she basically is like adopted the roles like with a family midwife. So she's the one that like wrangled all of the grandmas. Like she's like my rock and support.
Yeah.
He refers to many of these supporters as the thoughts and prayers people. She's like, we don't need the thoughts and prayers, right? Which like, so she would like really would get on, like she got on it. We're like, I see all these people on Facebook who are like, oh, let me know what you need. Here's like sending thoughts and prayers, which, you know, I say like on the one hand, like if that's all you have to offer, offer it. So for people who are supporting, to give what you actually can give and to really like dig down deep and think like, what is that? Like, is it possible for me to, in addition to the thoughts and prayers, send over a meal? Right? Like, could I actually do both? Because I think it becomes, you know, for some people, it is hard to acknowledge the lives that we live. Right. And perhaps like all they have in their wheelhouse and their bank account is thoughts and prayers. That's great. I think though that like that's been the hard thing when you know that there are people that can do more. So do what you can. And I think that it's also our role as caregivers to be open to that and to say like, I do need the help. Like this is what I specifically, and that's why I know like that app that you shared with me was great because you can have these very specific asks.
Right.
And so the more that I have done that, the better it's been. And do you just kind of again, like file your sort of list of who can do the things for me. Like, who can I actually stop at Costco for me and be okay.
Right.
But like, but as supporters to like look again and say like, what is in your capacity to do, and to also make it like an ongoing thing.
Right.
Right. Because when we have these crises, right? Like, so I've got a kid in the hospital for 2 weeks. People like shower you with meals and stuff like, where's like the once in a while. So like, I'm very fortunate that my best friend from college lives around the corner from me, but we have like an ongoing relationship that when she goes to Cub Foods, she will pick up this bag of gluten-free flour for me.
Oh, nice.
It's like a deal. And usually it's like 3, and like I'm going to Trader Joe's, I'm going to get this like very specific dip for her, or to Costco, whatever. Like, so we, it's that exchange of stuff, but it's like everybody needs those kinds of things, like you need, and the check-in, check in and see how I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because I do recognize like everybody is going through their own stuff too. And sometimes when people can't help, it's because they're going through so much. But also I'm like so focused on that human connection. And that's also like so much of what My-Vida is like bringing people back to that like root connection that exists between us as humans. And so if a supporter can reach out to a caregiver, also then that like fills the cup of the caregiver to be like, I'm going to reach back out to that supporter. You know what I mean? Because it's like my life isn't always tragic and full of crises, like just sometimes. And so I can't be able to, but like then that also like I feel like it builds that relationship. So then I don't feel, guilty, because again, I'm a recovering Catholic, and so it's like lots of Catholic guilt.
Right.
Oh, I feel so guilty that people are doing all this stuff for me. But then it does allow me to have that capacity, I think, to like give back as well. Because I do recognize people have done so much for me and listened to so much, So I don't know. I just think it builds us both back up.
Yeah.
No, that's very good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to share with us today. This has been really great to have you here.
Thank you.
People want to follow along with your family's story, learn more about My-Vida, where can people do that?
Yeah. So the website is my-vida.org. And so you can find it there. We're also like in the whole process of really revamping and kind of getting programming going. So hoping to have a lot of stuff established by the end of this year. The pandemic and grad school really put kind of a pause on things for me, but
and skin cancer.
Oh yeah. And the skin cancer, all these little tiny
things.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So myvida.org, and that will be like ways to get involved too. But also we are on Instagram and on Facebook. I was like, the Instagram, I think we can't have dashes, but it's my_Vida_org.
Okay.
So that I was like, I think that's right. And and then on Facebook as well.
Okay.
And one of these days I'll get I actually did start a LinkedIn. I forgot about that because it's on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Great.
So, yeah.
Liz, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I know that like any hour of your time is precious. Yeah. And so thank you for taking time to be with us and for just like your vulnerability and sharing and for being able to sort of share the perspective from a different, because, the 3 of us are all caregivers. We're all around the same age. And the way we provide care is really different because of the roles that we're in. And so it was really helpful to have your perspective. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And we got to get the girls together soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And watch, looking at your hot tub there behind you, maybe I should invite myself over. And
I was going to say it's open every night.
Okay. Good to know.
And every day, actually. So.
Okay. Great. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.